All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking something called the Great Illusion, why smart people make irrational decisions. We're going to challenge that comforting image we all have of ourselves, right? The idea that we sit calmly inside our minds, weigh the evidence perfectly objectively, and just logically make our choices. Well, it turns out it's a bit more complicated than that.
So let's start with a really simple personal question. Think back for a second to a recent trip to the mall, or maybe you were just browsing online late at night. You had absolutely zero intention of buying anything. You're just looking around. And then, boom, something catches your eye. Have you ever found yourself walking out with something or hitting that buy now button for an item that literally wasn't on your list at all? Come on, we've all been there.
Now, whether that sudden impulse buy was a shiny new smartphone, a luxury watch, or scaling all the way up to a sports car, a house, or even a major business investment, you probably experienced a very specific, almost predictable sequence of events right after. Almost immediately, you caught yourself rationally explaining to your friends, and let's be honest, to yourself, why it was actually a brilliant long-term choice. You say things like, well, it's an investment in my productivity, or they just don't make them like this anymore, it's going to last a lifetime. And you know what the funniest part is? Your reasons might have been entirely factually true.
But here is where things get truly fascinating. What if we have the sequence completely backward? What if the intense desire actually arrived way before the explanation? Just consider the possibility for a second that your decision was made entirely by your emotions in a fraction of a second, and all of that pristine, logical reasoning only showed up on the scene afterward to clean up and make it look presentable. I mean, it completely flips our understanding of how we make choices, doesn't it?
This dynamic perfectly captures the internal dialogue we all experience. Notice how the raw, chaotic feelings hit you instantly. It's this swirling storm of excitement, deep desire, curiosity, or sudden craving for status. That feeling always strikes first, and it's an immediate, almost physical reaction. Only afterward do the cold, calculating gears of logical justification start turning to back you up. Suddenly, out of nowhere, you're an absolute expert talking about excellent craftsmanship, brand reputation, and the unmatched durability of the materials. It's quite the transformation, honestly.
To quote the source material directly, our logic often acts almost like a lawyer hired to defend a decision that has already been made. Really think about that analogy for a second. You aren't acting as an impartial judge sitting on the bench discovering the objective truth. No, your brain is acting as a highly paid defense attorney, fiercely and creatively protecting a verdict your emotions have already handed down. So you aren't exploring the truth, you're just defending a feeling. To understand why our modern brains are fundamentally wired this way, we have to travel back in time. And I don't mean just a few centuries. I mean tens of thousands of years. Imagine you're an early human ancestor walking through the tall grass of the savannah at twilight. The shadows are getting really long. Suddenly, there's a violent rustle in the bushes just a few feet away. Your brain has a fraction of a second to decide, and the stakes literally could not be higher. Is it just the wind, or is it a predator? The evolutionary math here is brutally stark. Look, if you assume it's a predator and sprint away, you might waste some energy. You'll definitely get your heart rate up. And sure, you might look a little foolish to the rest of your tribe when a harmless little bird flies out of the bush, but crucially, you survive to see tomorrow. On the other hand, if you calmly and rationally deduce that it's merely the wind and you happen to be wrong, well, you become dinner. That's a mistake you only make exactly once, and it completely removes your logic from the gene pool. Over thousands of generations, this relentless pressure forged a profound reality about human psychology. The slightly paranoid, anxious, and overly cautious brain is the one that actually survived. We love to assume that our minds evolved to perceive reality with perfect, crystal clear, objective truth. We really want to believe we're rational, calculating machines, but we just aren't. Our minds evolved to keep us alive in a highly dangerous world. Perfect accuracy was a luxury, but survival, that was the absolute necessity. Because survival favored intense, immediate jump-to-conclusions reactions, those ancient instincts still operate as massive, invisible forces in our modern lives today. Things like fear, jealousy, status sensitivity, deep suspicion, tribal loyalty, these are the exact traits that kept us alive on the savannah. Today they mostly just make us irrationally angry at a passive-aggressive work email or intensely jealous of a stranger's vacation photos. The modern environment changed practically overnight, but our brain's hardware is still running incredibly ancient software. We're essentially walking time capsules. Now, right about here in the explainer, an obvious objection usually pops up. You might be listening to this and thinking, okay, sure, Maybe that's true for the average person, but surely high intelligence protects us from this, right? Highly educated, wildly intelligent people can override these biological glitches. It is a super comforting thought, assuming that a high IQ is the ultimate shield against irrationality. Unfortunately, the data tells a remarkably different story. Highly intelligent individuals routinely make highly irrational decisions. Why? Well, because raw brain power is absolutely not the same thing as being genuinely objective. Just imagine two people holding a deeply flawed, entirely incorrect belief. One has perfectly average intelligence, while the other is a literal genius. Who do you think produces the more convincing, elaborate, and intricate arguments to defend that wrong belief? Yep, usually it's the genius.
So, exceptionally intelligent people don't somehow magically bypass their emotions to arrive at the unvarnished truth. Often, they just use their massive intellect to become a much, much better lawyer for their inner emotions. They have the vocabulary and the cognitive stamina to build impenetrable, towering fortresses of logic just to protect a deeply rooted, emotionally driven bias. Intelligence simply doesn't guarantee rationality. Sometimes it literally just guarantees a much better excuse.
Let's ground this massive concept in a very practical, everyday example, like buying a car. Salespeople often assume, and customers will loudly claim, that their purchasing decisions are driven almost entirely by hard specifications. We talk a big game about logic, facts, safety ratings, and miles per gallon. But while we confidently trumpet those practical things, they often represent just a tiny fraction of the actual decision. A massive 80% of the driving force behind that purchase is actually tied up in your emotional connection, your identity, and your need for belonging. The real forces behind that huge financial commitment are almost entirely invisible to the naked eye. It's the deep comfort of a family recommendation that makes you feel connected to your roots. It's fulfilling a childhood dream you've harbored since you were 10. It's a profound sense of having finally made it, a raw desire for status among your peers, or maybe even just the paralyzing fear of looking foolish to your neighbors. The hard truth we have to face is that a car purchase is rarely just about getting from point A to point B. It's almost always a massive statement about your identity.
Now, once you start seeing these hidden emotional patterns, both in yourself and in your friends and family, there is one massive trap you absolutely need to avoid. Do not use this framework as a weapon to just point fingers, act superior, and call everyone around you irrational. That completely misses the entire point of this explainer. We're aiming for genuine empathy and deeper understanding here, not cheap judgment. If you just use this to win arguments at the dinner table, well, you're falling into the exact same ego-driven trap we literally just discussed. Because here is the truly beautiful thing about all of this. Human beings are not defective just because we're emotionally driven. Emotion isn't a glitch. It isn't a bug in the code. It is the core operating system. Without emotion, without that fundamental drive of desire or fear or love, we wouldn't actually care enough to make any decisions at all. You just sit there, completely paralyzed by pure cold logic. The goal isn't to kill your emotions, which is biologically impossible anyway. The goal is simply to recognize their massive, invisible influence over the logic we use every single day.
So, the next time someone proudly claims to be a purely logical, totally rational person, just smile and maybe pause for a moment. They might be right about their logic, but they're highly likely blind to the fundamental emotional forces operating beneath their own explanations. Human beings are, first and foremost, emotional creatures capable of remarkable rationality. So, as you leave this explainer today, I want to leave you with one critical question for the next time you have to make a major life choice. As you confidently lay out all your perfect, logical reasons, who's actually sitting in the driver's seat? Is it your logic or the emotion that hired it?